Hello again, welcome to another edition of the Real Ale Guide. We've got an exclusive here for YouTube for you. I'm with Jim Robinson, head of Courage and Wells and Youngs. Hi Jim.
Hello Simon, how you doing?
And we've got something very special today, Jim. This is Courage's Russian Imperial Stout, which has just been re-released to the American market, I believe. Am I correct?
That's right. When I started my career in '77, joined Courage's in London, and this was one of the beers that we brewed there once a year, and I've always loved it and held it in the highest esteem. And when Wells and Youngs bought Courage just over 4 years ago, I dreamt of being able to reproduce this beer. And cutting a very long story short, I achieved one of my dreams, which was to be able to brew Courage Imperial Russian Stout.
Fantastic. I was at the brewery in February with you. I did ask a couple of questions, and you did mention the Imperial Russian Stout very fondly. And I probably should have dug a little bit deeper, because you were probably in the process, if this was brewed in May 2011, you were probably deep in thought and plans with this already.
Yep, I'm just planning the 2012 vintage. We will be brewing it inside the next month or so, and it would then be available to go into the trade in the late summer, early autumn. Exact timing hasn't yet been confirmed, but I'm hoping to be able to go out to America again and launch the 2012 vintage in late September, early October.
With talking about America, the influence of America with they seem to be really enjoying their Imperial Russian Stout at the moment. Did that play a part in the decision to relaunch it to the American market initially?
Yes, it did, and from my point of view, it wasn't the Americans persuading me it would be a great idea to redo Russian Stout. I didn't need any persuasion. What the Americans gave to us was almost a guaranteed sale for at least one brew, so it de-risked the project from a commercial point of view. And I've got to thank the American beer aficionados for being able to fulfill my dream, as I said, because without them, if you like, underwriting the project, it would have been quite difficult to justify it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm about ready to get mine in the glass. Get it open. Into this rather nice Imperial Stout Courage glass we have here. Oh wow, look at this. This looks absolutely wonderful. 10% ABV. Mine's was a little bit lively. I got quite a large, that's probably about a 4-finger head. Again, it's off-white, kind of tan coloured head with some different variants in the bubbles. There's all sorts of different sized bubbles in this glass here. What have you got, Jim, in your glass?
Likewise, a very, very dark beer. Again, you can't see through it. It's almost jet black. The head is quite intense and quite a fine head, so quite creamy. But as you say, a more tan colour than white, and just a hint of the strength of alcohol and flavour that lies underneath it.
I'm finding it very impressive that it's 10% ABV and it's holding its head so well. Normally the alcohol volume cuts straight through the head and it dissipates very quickly, but mine's more or less staying there the whole time you were talking there.
Yeah, one of the secrets of Russian Stout in the brewing process is how we manage the fermentation, and quite a few Imperial Stouts have the alcohol but not the structure. And that's partly to do with the recipe grist that they use, but more likely by not understanding the complexity of control that you need in the fermentation. And what we do with Russian Stout is, even though we have 10% alcohol, we still have quite a high degree of residual gravity. So we're up in the 20s for our PG. And we take quite a long time in the maturation and warm conditioning process to develop the flavour and keep almost a physical structure to the beer. It's not filtered either. It's just sedimented and then bottled. So we keep all of that structure in the beer. It's unusual for me to talk about the physical taste attributes of a beer, but I think with Russian Stout you have to talk about it. It's almost kind of chewy.
All right. Yeah, let's get the nose. Let's get the nose on this. If I can get it through the head. Oh, I'm getting a lot of deep, dark fruits, like forest fruits.
Yeah, and the alcohol itself comes through there. So the alcohol is coming as a carrier for all of those fruits that come from the yeast and the hop.
Okay. I'm going to take a taste. I've got quite a big head, so I am struggling a little bit to get the head, the aromas through that big head. So I'm going to take a taste. Oh. Oh, that is smooth. Isn't that
That
smooth?
takes me 30 years straight away. That
really does coat all the inside of my mouth, my tongue, and it's got like a silkiness to it that just stays.
yes, it's an extremely complex character. So you have a hot bitterness, but it's not so resinous that it coats the tongue. It has a high alcohol, but it also has this physical structure that I was talking about behind it. So you don't get the acidic sharpness of some strong beers. Makes it eminently drinkable.
Yeah. How if you don't mind me asking, Jim, because I'm just a beer reviewer, how do you get a beer, a stout like this from, say, your average stout, which is about 4 or 5%, right up there to 10%? Is it a secret in that?
I don't think you would call it a secret as such. Good brewers will know the techniques that you use, but I think to put things simply, you use twice as much raw material to get half as much beer.
Right.
So the malts and things in terms of kilos per litre or pounds per barrel, you're using nearly twice as much material to produce the same volume. But as I say, the real art in producing Courage Russian Stout is managing the fermentation profile. And the initial fermentation is extremely vigorous and fierce, and we have to manage and control it, and it's over in about 70 hours. And then we want to move it to another vessel where we warm condition it, and that's where the magic comes into the Russian Stout. If we over ferment it first time,
Yeah.
and you don't do that intermediate step of a couple of months warm conditioning, it doesn't have the magic.
I see. I'm also getting, like I said, it's like a deep, almost Christmas cakey sort of taste to this beer. Dark fruits, there's hints of coffee and caramel. What's your tasting notes for this, Jim?
I think you could almost pick out nearly everything in the tasting book. But for me, the key characters are again the coffee, toffee, caramel characters that you get naturally from stout, but supported by quite a vinous strength from the yeast and the alcohol, and then a hoppy aftertaste, but not too astringent.
No, this is turning into a bit of a beer review and an interview. This is at the same time, but I got to ask you this question. You were the last person to brew Courage Russian Imperial Stout. Was it 1980 something?
I was one of the team who last brewed it in London, and it was one of the last beers before we closed the Horsley Down Brewery in 1982.
Right.
And though that beer was brewed there, it was actually, I think, shipped to Tadcaster to be bottled.
Right. How close, how satisfied are you that this is a replica to the original Imperial Stout, Jim?
I think if you could put it in a time machine and take us back to the 1960s and 70s and put this on a bar along with the beer that we were producing and selling there, no one would detect a difference. It is the original Courage Russian Stout, and fortunately there are still one or two colleagues and ex-colleagues who are still around,
right.
Who actually have been very supportive and helped jog my memory on recipes and brewing techniques. And they have been extremely complimentary about the beer, including my old boss at Horsley Down.
Oh, wow.
He was particularly impressed, and he also said it was the beer with the lowest form of efficiency because all of the brewers tended to drink it before it ever got into the tray.
So there must have been a level of excitement there. When this news, there must have been a buzz around your close circles, if you like. When you announced to these people that you were going with that, there must have been a lot of telephone calls and oh great, this is being re-released.
Yes, very much so. And I think probably two events spring to mind. Firstly, and almost inevitably, the relaunch at Falling Rock Tap House in Denver, where everybody was just so positive and supportive. It was amazing. But then when I came back to UK, we did a slightly impromptu tasting with the North London Camera team.
Right.
And I guess I hadn't really mentally associated Imperial Russian Stout with Camera. And I arranged with our commercial team to have the beer available on a Courage tasting evening, and again was overwhelmed by the positiveness of their response and how supportive they were about us bringing this beer back, and how much they enjoyed it. And then some of the stories that came out from their archives and history about their experiences of drinking the beer in the 70s and 80s in its heartland.
This for me, tasting this, I've tasted a lot of the American Imperial Russian Stouts, Oscar Blues 1050 and North Divides Yeti, I believe, and a few of the other ones. This really is at 10%. Some of the American ones, the IBUs are huge. Some of them are 100 IBUs plus. This has got a very much more. I've just been sipping it while you were talking, and it's a lot more mellow. You'd never believe it was 10%, and it's going down so well. Could you, without me reading, I normally read the back of the bottle on the reviews, but could you? You have a bit of a story with Courage, and is it something to do with Catherine the chord or something? Or would you be able to enlighten
Sure.
us with that?
The category of beer, it stems back to the early 1800s and the late 18th century. There was quite a popularity of the Russian royal court visiting London.
Yeah.
And at that time, there was a brewery called, at the end of the 18th century, Thrale's Brewery. And then at the beginning of the 19th century, it was purchased from the Thrale family by Barclay and became Barclay Perkins. And on one visit, the Russian royal family had a particular like of Thrale's and later Barclay's porter, which was the beer that was regularly sold in London. So they asked the brewery to ship some to St. Petersburg, which they did, but sadly it didn't survive the journey. It went off. So the Russians were somewhat upset and the British brewers were somewhat embarrassed.
Right.
And the brewmaster at Barclay Perkins, who I believe was actually Mr. Perkins, created a super strong porter so that it could survive the journey. It had getting on for twice the alcohol content and quite a lot more hop content because hops act as a very good natural preservative, as does alcohol. And they casked up this kind of super strong porter and shipped it to the Russian court, and the beer survived the journey extremely well and was very much liked by the Russian guests at the royal court. So it became established as the beer from Britain for the Russians, hence its name, Imperial Russian Stout.
Oh, right. Fantastic, fantastic. One more question before I'm going to give a rating on this beer, but one more question before you go. Courage. I met you a year ago back in February at Wells and Young's Brewery. You did mention Imperial Russian Stout. I probably should have dug a little deeper with that one, but I also asked you a question with your close connections with Courage. Were you going to bring back some of the other beers Courage used to brew? I'll ask you again in 2012. Is there any further developments with some Courage beers you'd like to bring back from the past?
Well, there's nothing I can sit here and categorically tell you about, Simon, other than the 2012 vintage of the Russian Stout, which we've talked about. But it would be wrong of me not to mention a beer known as CSB, Courage Sparkling Beer. And if any of your watchers or colleagues were ever in the British Royal Navy or associated with some of the British bases, they remember that beer extremely fondly.
Right.
And I guess if I'm blessed with being allowed to produce two dream beers from my Courage era, the second one would be CSB.
Fantastic. So, is that a session beer? Is that a sparkling bitter or maybe a lager?
My colleagues in the 70s that dealt with the Navy would tell you it was a session beer, even on submarines. But at 5% alcohol, it probably should be considered as a celebration or a sipping beer a bit.
Fantastic. I'm going to rate this, Jim. I didn't rate the previous review, but I'm going to rate this. This for me is at the top end of the Imperial Russian Stout I've ever tried. I'm liking. Did you have the IBUs with this beer?
Yes, it would. This one will be around about 60.
I'm liking that level of bitterness with that. You'd never believe it was 10% ABV. I think one bottle would be enough. It's definitely not a session beer, but it's kind of for me, it's a special occasion. Put the other bottle away for 10 years type of beer. So I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Thanks very, very much for this exclusive look at Imperial Russian Stout, Jim. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Simon. And as ever, it's great to talk to you. And hopefully during 2012, we'll find some other good beers to discuss and enjoy together. Great to see you. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Jim. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.